Hello, hello. Welcome to today's episode of Office Hour. I am here live from my studio here in Oklahoma, where it's finally decided to be fall. I hope that the weather is nice where you are as well. I've got my cozy sweater, I've got my coffee, and I am really, really happy to be back for Office Hour. Today, we are going to talk about a formula for content and posting strategy. Now, if you are like me, it can be extremely overwhelming to think about all the different objectives we're trying to meet with marketing for an organization's goals in general. And then when you niche that down or granularize that into specific pieces of content on specific channels that have to follow specific best practices for that channel and work with the algorithm and work with all your other content, it becomes this big jumbled mess and it's hard to organize and sometimes hard to roll back up into that strategy, into those objectives to figure out what's really working on social or not. We know, like, oh, this posted better than that post, but we don't really know sometimes how all those posts are working together. So today we are going to talk about a formula that I use to plan that content that I've used in various formats with various businesses, organizations, teams, and something that I hope will help you make a little sense of the mess if you feel like there's a mess in your social media content planning, or if you feel like there's not a mess in your social media content planning, you can just come and compare and see, maybe a way that we do it a little bit differently at social media posts or um, how maybe you could tweak what you're already doing. So thank you for those of you who are joining us live on social media. We're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, and we are on YouTube. And of course, we are live in the Social Media Pulse community. Now, if you're joining us on social media, go ahead. You can stay on social media. You can comment. I can check the comments. I'm seeing Sean is joining us live today from across the pond. I hope the weather's nice for you, Sean. Sunny afternoon, he says. So that's great. Um, but if you're joining us live on social media, go ahead and drop in the comments, maybe where you're joining us from, how you found us, if you're a member of the community. Hi, Lauren. I'm so glad that you could be here today as well. If you are also joining us live and you're not a member of the Social Media Pulse community, what are you waiting for? It's absolutely free. You get access to resources like Office Hour, like the great free courses in Pulse Academy, our voluminous content that we have being produced every single day, every single week, month in, month out by our great content team, Christine, and of course, incredible community management by Deb. Everything in Social Media Pulse community is free. So go ahead and join us on Social Media Pulse community. And if you want, I'm going to go ahead and drop right in here on a banner. I'm going to show this ticker so you can join us live there or go back and access. I've got some resources that I'm sharing today that will be linked at that link that's going across in the ticker. So I'm going to go ahead and also post that in the okay. So let's go ahead and dive in. Go ahead and pull that ticker down. And we're going to talk about this formula for content and posting strategy. Do you have a formula that you like to use? Do you have a system that you like to use to organize that, to plan that? If you don't, the resources that we're sharing today might help. A few months ago, back in July, we did an office hour related to just the kind of basic steps of establishing a social media strategy. And this slide that I'm sharing right now on the screen is a reiteration from that presentation back in July about the steps that I like to follow when establishing a social media strategy. So, first, setting goals and objectives. I go a little bit off course of other people, and I sometimes select my networks next to figure out this is where we're already at. So, we've got to figure out content that meets the needs of that particular network. Then, we're going to conduct an audit. Then, that fourth step is planning that content and posting strategy. And that's what we're going to go ahead and talk about today. So, again, I'm going to drop that link in the comments. I have these where I can copy and paste them, but sometimes it's just easier to type it out in the moment. So if you want to go back and review that office hour and kind of see what we talked about as far as establishing a strategy, that is there. But today we're going to focus on step number 4, planning that content and posting strategy. So when you're planning your content, the very first thing, so this is assuming that you've already done these other steps. You've already figured out what your goals are and your objectives. You've done an audit so that you know what personas you should or need to be talking to on your social channels. You have already figured out your voice and tone based on those personas or ICPs. The assumption here is that all of that strategy work has already been done, and we're going to focus specifically on planning what the heck do I post? And we are looking at social media today in a little bit of a vacuum from the rest of our marketing efforts. And of course, content is really the bread and butter of all marketing. So, of course, other marketing functions, other channels, other types of channels, really, other channels are going to be using content, creating content. Other teams might be creating content. But today we're going to talk specifically about social media content, sort of in a vacuum. So, the very first step when we're figuring out what content we're going to create after we figured out all the other strategy steps is we're going to figure out something called content pillars. This is probably a familiar term to you if you've worked in social media before, but if it's not a familiar term, this is really what a content pillar is in a nutshell. A content pillar is simply, in most social media um, channels, pages, platforms, businesses, organizations are going to have 3 to 5 of these. That's the things that you're consistently talking about. The themes, the messages, the topics that you post about, the things that you want to amplify, the things that you want to make sure your audience knows is important to you, that you have valuable information about, insight about. It's what you are posting about, the topics. So, some examples would be social media pulse community. We post about social media news. We post social media resources, tips, um, content that's going to help you do your job better. We also post educational content like office hour, like promoting our free courses that are going to help you do a better job doing your job. Those are some content pillars. But we also like to be social on social media. So we have content that is specifically designed to help encourage conversation among our community and to encourage community in and of itself. Is creating and nurturing community is a huge part of what we're all about. Another example might be if you are a person who works in let's say you're a marketing strategist. That's probably a very likely thing that you are doing if you're joining us watching Office Hour today. You might be a marketing strategist and you might actually share marketing tips. You might share about mental health. You might share about entrepreneurship. If you are a retail organization, you might post about, let's say you're a retail company that creates um, oh goodness, I should have had some of these on the tip of my tip of my tongue. You've got health products, health-related products and supplements. You might post about your actual, promoting your actual products, but you also might share information and tips about health and wellness or recipes. So those would be content pillars. Content pillars, the 3 to 5 topics, messages, or themes that you post about. Figure that out first, and I like to think of everything that we do for social media sort of as a funnel. And that's the top of the funnel, the widest part of the funnel when we're talking about social media content. After you figure out what those pillars are, then you can go into each pillar individually. Sometimes there's overlap, sometimes there's not. Go into each pillar individually, and you are going to figure out really 4 things. You're going to figure out what the content so you're gonna figure out first, at what stage does this content reach someone? Is it someone, if we remember from just kind of marketing basics and that marketing funnel, top of funnel is awareness for social media, middle of funnel is engagement, and bottom of funnel is conversion. So is it somebody who is aware of a problem that they have, a need that they have, something that needs to be solved, where your solution overlaps with whatever that need is? Is it somebody who is aware that they have the problem, aware that you might provide the solution, and they already are following you? They already are aware of you, and you want them to engage with you. You want them to relate to you. You want them to have an affinity and find value in the content that you are creating. That's the engagement phase of that marketing funnel. And then finally, the golden the golden stage, the stage that we want everybody to get to, is that conversion phase where somebody's ready to make a decision. They want to work with you. They want to buy from you. They have made that decision. They've added to cart. They have filled out a contact form and they're ready to go. What is content that is going to be more beneficial to that person? So that's the baseline. We've got to figure out first what marketing stage the person is in, who we're trying to reach. Then, after that, you have people who've already established different personas or ICPs, ideal customer profiles of people who you need to be talking to. These are the ideal people who will get to that conversion stage. So, figuring out what stage they're in, who they are, we could probably flip flop this order. Um, but the next step would be those strategies to reach that particular group of people. Now, strategies for social media, in fact, strategies for social media content, we can have a whole lesson on it. In fact, we probably should have a whole office hour, a whole course dedicated to strategies on social media. But here are some examples of strategies to reach people at different stages of that marketing funnel. You can reach somebody through sharing knowledge or curating other content, providing value. That's a strategy. You could, I mentioned earlier, one of the strategies that we have for social media posts is creating and nurturing community. You can have purely promotional content. That is a strategy. Content that says, look at this thing, buy this thing, use this service. That's okay on social. I think sometimes we get caught up in we can't always be salesy on social. You can occasionally. It can't be your whole strategy. You have to do other strategic things to reach the people that you're trying to reach, that persona, that ICP. But that can be a strategy. Um, Network marketing is a strategy. Working within your network to amplify each other's messages absolutely can be a strategy. Um, Celebrating holidays or connecting with different groups based on their interests is a strategy that you can employ on social media. So we're going down that funnel. We're figuring out content pillar first, And then under each content pillar, what marketing stage are they in? Who do we want to talk to? What strategy we're going to use to reach them? And then finally, what's the purpose of a specific piece of content? Did you know there are only three purposes and reasons why people visit social media at all? Why people use social media? Three of them, only three of them. And we can get caught up in nuances and we can get caught up in synonyms and we can get caught up in parsing that out. But really, the three reasons that people use social media is this: they're going there to be informed, they're going there to be entertained, or they're going there to connect with other people. Now, this is the time I'm going to pause. I've been talking for about 15 minutes. If you have any comments, questions, I'm going to hop on over to the community for a moment, see if anyone is chatting on the community post. Oh, I see Mandy in the community. So, hi, Mandy. I miss you. Dear friend of mine who was a TA for me in my social media class back in a former life for both of us. She's gone on to do great things for her marketing career. I'm in a different job now, so really, really good to see you. And Mandy has a question that she's posted in the community. So if you're watching on social, you're probably not seeing it in your comments. And if you're watching the replay, I'm going to go ahead and read the comment so that we can all know what we're talking about. And the question that Mandy has is, how do you get content slash story ideas from your boots on the ground team with minimal admin time and turn it into content? Okay, this wasn't on the agenda today, and I'm so glad you brought it up. I'm gonna address it more toward the end after we talk about that. We're gonna get to a slide that's about the nitty-gritty of content production, and I have some ideas there for you, Mandy. Okay, so put a pin in that. Gonna go back. Phyllis is listening over on YouTube. I can always count on Phyllis on YouTube. Phyllis is my YouTube queen. Love, love, love that she uses YouTube, and I love that we can stream to all the places. We are using StreamYard to stream the show today, and we're streaming to Facebook, we're streaming to LinkedIn, we're streaming to YouTube, and we're streaming directly into the community all through one tool. Love it. So, hi, Phyllis. So glad that you can join us. But back on this kind of hot take that I have about three purposes of social media content. If you really think about it, everything that people do when they're consuming social media content, and therefore when we're posting social media content, rolls up into those three things. Now, back, I think it was 2017 or 18, kind of the early days of Facebook live streaming, back when BuzzFeed was just ruling the world on social, right? BuzzFeed was an innovator in lists and memes and listicles and all those things. BuzzFeed was just killing it back then. Now, other people have had success with different types of content. BuzzFeed continues to have success, but back in 2017, 2018, they were doing an incredible job. And there was a TED Talk by a BuzzFeed employee, and I don't remember off the top of my head who exactly it was. Should have probably found that original link. But I remember watching this TED Talk, and I'm going to go ahead and pull myself off camera for a second just to make this a smidge bigger. And the BuzzFeed method that they started using was something called cultural cartography. And the way that they thought about purposes or jobs of social media content was how it helped people do something specific. And they came up with this chart. This is, if you just Google cultural cartography, um, even without the BuzzFeed reference, you will be able to find this. And it still relates to those three purposes of social media. If something makes you laugh or smile, over here on the right-hand side in the red, that is something that you're going there to be entertained. You know that you can go to social media and you can count on certain types of content producers to make you laugh or smile. Um, In the middle there, kind of the greenish area, like, this is so true. You're connecting with people, you're relating to people. Social media content that goes viral is generally just a really nice intersection of content that is relatable, but also original. So when people say something that you can relate to, but they say it in a creative way or a um, original way, you're going to be like, oh, yes, this is so true. I relate to this so much. Or, um, the being informed, right? Like, you can the green area, like, if something's goals or, kind of that red or the area between the green and the yellow, curiosity, that's you're being informed about something. So, even though you can parse it down into smaller categories, you can label things differently, at the end of the day, there are 3 purposes for social media content and 3 purposes and reasons why people go to social media: to be informed, to be entertained, and to be connected. I'm going to pop myself back up. Nope, that's the wrong size. Still figuring out how to live produce. We got it. I'm back. I'm small, slides are big. We're good to go. Okay. So now before we go on to content production, what I do want to share is a resource that takes everything that we talked about, those funnels, all the different things that you need to consider, and it puts it into a spreadsheet form, a template that you can use to plan your social media content. So give me a second. I'm going to find that link. If I can get to it. There we go. Gotta copy it. And if you have any questions for me while I'm muddling through live producing, go ahead, drop those into the comments. So here's a link to a spreadsheet that you can use. It's also linked. You don't have to save this link if you just go to the post in the social media post community. If you go to that one, socialmediapost.info/OH for office hour dash October dash 13, or just go right now to socialmediapost.community. We're up there in the featured tab, and you can find a link to this resource. And I'm going to share my screen so everyone can see what we are looking at. Okay, so this is what you're gonna get. You're gonna be prompted to make a copy of this Google Sheet. And there's also instructions on making the copy, but the link that I shared, I think just prompts you to make that copy um, without manually doing it. And this is that spreadsheet. It is a content production spreadsheet. You've probably seen content calendars before. You probably have one. And this is one that takes all those things into consideration that we're talking about, and a few additional things. It's kind of that cross between the production and the strategy. Figuring out, of course, what date you want to publish on. This is formatted as a date. The time, formatted as a time. This, make this a little bigger. This is that campaign/content pillar. First, figuring out what is that topic that you're talking about. It could be a holiday promotion. We're getting ready to come up on the holidays. You could have a holiday promotion. It could be about a particular set of resources that you have. Whatever that content pillar is, it could be, related to your lifestyle expertise or your marketing tips that you want to share with people. Whatever the content pillar is, just label them. And if you don't use drop down lists when you use Excel or Google Sheets, I'm a big fan of Airtable as a database tool. I recommend learning how to create pre-selected like drop-down lists so that you come up with those 3 to 5 content pillars, go ahead and format this column to meet your needs, and then you just select it each time and you don't have to type it in, as we've done here on this objective column. So on the objective, you're going to figure out, is this for someone who's in the awareness stage? Is this piece of content for someone in the engagement stage? Is this piece of content for someone in the conversion stage? There's a lot of columns here. We're going to go through the rest of the columns. And the reason why it's important to have that granular data on every single piece of content is because later on, you can sort the spreadsheet, you can filter the spreadsheet, and you can look at it according to each column, right? You can say, I want to look at all the content we created for this persona that was for a person in conversion. And you can look at that holistically and you can sort of figure out, are you front loading all of your content for people who are in awareness? Are you putting too much content for people who are in the conversion stage and missing trying to draw people in to get them to engage with your content? So, one of the things about just filling out spreadsheets that it can seem if you are creating content and you're trying to do it on the fly and you don't have a system, this at first can feel like it's going to make the process slower rather than faster. But this is an analogy I use, a slingshot. You can throw a rock and it's going to go fast and it's going to go so far. You can use a slingshot and that rock is going to go a lot further, or whatever it is that you're putting in the slingshot for this analogy, right? You have to pull it back first and it's going to seem like you're making, it's counterproductive. You're going to pull it fast, but when you release it, it's going to go further faster. The springboard is a slingshot. Pick an analogy. So sometimes slowing down, creating formulas, systems, processes, it's going to slow you down temporarily, but it'll help you go further, faster later. So remember that. So the next column that we've got here in this resource that we've created for you is to identify which persona or ICP. Again, I recommend using that data validation feature, whether it's in Excel or Google Sheets, to create a list of the ICPs that you have so that you can just select from the list. Um, oops. Actually, so there is an error here. I'll fix this. Um, I've got a data validation on this column when I don't need it. So we're going to go ahead and um, we'll clear those later because that's supposed to be just for you to create your own list, not my list. For purpose, inform, entertain, or connect. And then we're going to talk about content production. And so this sheet is that crossover. We've got strategy here on the first 6 or 7 columns, and then the actual content production on the back end, where we get into that nitty gritty of the media format, the channel, social post, all the things that we probably generally think about when we think about content production, editorial calendars. So we're going to hide this. We're going to remove this, and we're going to go back to the slides. If you have, I've got a couple comments. Let's see what the comments are. Airtable, Taylor says Airtable. Yes, I'm a huge, huge, huge Airtable fan. Huge. um, definitely, definitely. In fact, when I was building the spreadsheet for today, I thought about doing an Airtable. I thought no, because there's an adoption barrier there if you're not already familiar with it. But I like it because what I call it is Excel on steroids. It's color coded. It's much easier to sort and filter and see, but it does the same thing. It's a database tool. It does the same thing as this spreadsheet. So take the spreadsheet, make it your own, make it work for you. And thank you, Phyllis, for the nice compliment that it's a very organized system. That's a high compliment coming from you, Phyllis, because you're the queen of systems and processes. Oh, wrong one. There we go. Okay. So when we talk about content production, oh, I'm back. I'm back in the community checking in. And of course, we've got Deb in there community managing because community manager extraordinaire just repassed her community manager certification from Meta. So great job, Deb. You could probably write the test, but you passed their test. And Deb is in there dropping links. The TED talk that I mentioned, she went and found it for me. Thank you, Deb. She found the cultural cartography original source and adding a few additional resources. So thank you, Deb. You're awesome. Okay, so moving into content production. And this is where Mandy had some questions about if you're in the office doing social media work, sometimes there's other teams that are your boots on the ground people doing the work of the organization that you've got to figure out and what content you can even create for those content pillars, helping identify those content pillars, helping identify specific pieces of content that you can actually produce. So I actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pause for a minute before we talk about actually choosing a channel for the content, figuring out that media format, and let's talk about how you get your boots on the ground people to help you figure out content pillars. There are, depending on the culture of the organization, I've worked in several. There are different ways that you can do this, Mandy. And if other people have suggestions, that's the beauty of community. Drop it in the community chat, drop it in the social media chat, and let me know how you do this. How do you get your people to help inform you about what's going on so that you can create the content? Again, this is where systems and processes and predictability really helps. Here's one option, Mandy, for you. You could weekly, you could have a weekly call for content ideas. And that's as simple as a email, a Slack channel that you have dedicated to that, a group text, whatever system that people are already using to communicate within your organization, adopt that system and then just ask people to ad hoc send you content ideas, but also proactively ask for them once a week or once every 2 weeks, just depending on, again, the culture, the workflow, how responsive people are to you. That's one option. The other option would be you could formalize it even a little bit more and create a form for people to complete. So it would be a form that had whatever parameters that you need people to identify for you that would help you identify if this content idea is a good content idea. This is what I find with most people who are not social media practitioners. A lot of times they'll self select and think that something isn't worthy of posting about. And oftentimes the ideas that they have might not be, but you get to put on your creative hat and you get to think about how can this tie into a message, a theme, a content pillar that I have that gets at the crux of what you're trying to communicate about. So ask them, make it okay for people just to submit anything and everything and spam you with ideas. The third option that has worked for me in different organizations before is you could actually make it a contest where um, there's some kind of incentive for it's essentially user generated content or employee generated content, but you could make it a contest for whoever is submitting the best idea. We've done some of this recently here just within the Agora Pulse organization, content creation challenges or challenges with photos that show the culture of the organization that we're sharing internally. It's an internal thing, but some of that sometimes goes out externally as well. So those are some ideas for you. Let me know in the comments if that's helpful to you or if I need to dive in a little bit more with some ideas. And again, if you're watching the replay or if you're watching live, if you're watching the replay or if you're watching live, go ahead and drop your suggestions in for Taylor as well. So those are some of my suggestions. What do you have? When we get into that nitty gritty of actually producing it, again, it seems cumbersome, it seems boring, but actually putting your thoughts into a spreadsheet format or even just sticky notes. You're not really into like digital spreadsheets and stuff. Do it with sticky notes, move stuff around and think about how you can organize things. And when you're determining some of these big buckets. Um, but really, you have to know what channel you're producing content for before you produce that content, right? It's going to dictate. This isn't a content production lesson, but one of the things you have to think about are best practices for a particular channel, what the algorithm is liking for a particular channel, what content formats work best for a particular channel, etc. Think about the channel first, then think about that media or post format. And in the spreadsheet that I just shared, there is a column for um, media format, and it's pre-populated with some of the more common media formats. But again, you can go in, change that data validation. And this is not moving. I zoomed in so we can see it better. There we go. It's pre-populated with some things that are common, but make it your own. If you have different media formats that you use, or if you don't use some of these ever, it's just in alphabetical order, except story is up there out of order, I'm noticing, but it might be just a GIF that you're sharing that was very, 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 very common and popular for a while, still works on some channels, still works with some audiences and personas. Just sharing a GIF with a comment or a meme. Really, that should be GIF slash meme because it could even just be a meme graphic that you're creating. An actual graphic, a story, ephemeral content, stories, things that disappear after 24 hours, still popular, still useful. A link preview, a photo, a poll. You could quote tweet somebody. You could plan to quote tweet somebody. You could plan a reel, or really, that should probably say short form video because that short form video is being replicated across all platforms. A reel or a TikTok, right? Um, you could plan to reshare other people's content. That's something I think people often forget as well. Content doesn't have to always be original. You can take someone else's content, add original thought to it. That could be a strategy, thought leadership, right? Creating original thought leadership or newsjacking other people's thought leadership and adding your 2 cents to it. That could be a strategy, and you could accomplish that through a reshare. Or it could just be a text only update. Sometimes on some channels, text only updates, especially when we're thinking about crisis communication, absolutely still effective. So choosing your media format next is really important. And then finally, thinking about what are the best practices for that particular piece of content. What's the brand style of that particular piece of content? Before you produce it, you need to figure out these things. Again, this isn't a content production lesson. However, important to think about all the pieces, all the way back to the very, very, very beginning stages of our strategy, where we're setting business or marketing goals and objectives before we start thinking about anything that we're doing on social, all the way through those nitty-gritty details of literally what are all the fine details of alt text and captions and accessibility and graphic design and brand style and all the things that we have to do to make good social media content. That's the next piece of this. So figuring out the details are next, and our spreadsheet has some places where you can do that. Place to post your copy, write your copy. This is a formula that's going to count those characters for you. And you can include a link to the graphic or the video that you plan to accompany this post. Um, if you've got, a file management system where you're saving things, or maybe you're using a digital tool like Canva to create graphics, you can drop that link there to where you can find the Canva file or the Google Drive link or the OneDrive or whatever file sharing system you're using. You can drop that there, and place for us to write out the alt text that we plan to use to accompany a graphic, or again, a link to the caption file that you're going to need to upload with a video to make it accessible and make the algorithm like your page better if you're putting up caption files or SRT files with your videos that you're producing. place for us to, things that I think are pretty common, thinking about hashtag lists. If you're going to mention or tag anybody within the post. And yeah, I think that was the last one. So that is the spreadsheet. And we've got a couple more slides, I think. So we've talked about so far. Okay, we rolled it way back to the beginning. We'll pause, we'll go back. The very beginning of today, we said a formula for our content and posting strategy really is about the fourth step when we're thinking about social media strategy. The assumption with a formula for good content and posting strategy is that you have to know where you're going. You have to know what target you're aiming at. And that involves setting marketing goals and objectives, figuring out our channels that we want to post on, conducting a social media audit, and then, sub things of that audit that would probably be like step 3.5 on my strategy sheet would be things like determining your personas or your ICPs, and then also determining voice and tone and brand style across the board before you start even thinking about content. That was the things that you think about before you think about your content strategy. The things that we've spent the last 40 minutes talking about, content strategy, all the way from what marketing stage is the person in, who we want to talk to, what are some strategies for reaching them, what's the purpose of that piece of content, what's the content pillar that that content fits in, all those nitty-gritty details that you think about the strategy of the content. Then you think about content production and you think about what channel it's going to go on, the best practices for that content. You're thinking about writing the copy, all the things that you have to do in order to produce that content. And I'm going to pause there before we talk, and I'm going to do this again. I'm going to pull down my slides so my face is here so you can really focus on what I'm saying. So I don't have any slides dedicated to this is the best type of content to post. This is the media format that you want to use. These are the best practices, because that's an age-old algorithm question. And only the platforms themselves know what content is going to perform well. I have pages where links perform really well. I manage pages where a link would not even resonate with anybody in that audience at all. Same thing with text only updates. I mentioned earlier that in some cases, text only updates, very, very, very effective. Other cases, nope. It'll just, you're going to put it out into a black hole and it will never be seen again by anybody if you're doing a text only update. And this is the thing that I think is really important to remember, is that the content itself, the strategy, the message, the content pillar, if it's meeting the need of your audience and it's something that, according to our cultural cartography sheet, resonates with them, and it's meeting their need to be informed, entertained, or connect with each other, with you, etc., that is so much more powerful than the media format. I think, you get questions from people who are managing pages, maybe your clients, maybe your boss, maybe somebody who works for you. Oh, we need more engagement. We need to post more short form video. Possibly true. The algorithms, as a general rule, are favoring short form video right now. But if your short form video is bad and won't connect with your audience, it doesn't matter. So take the time, do the work to figure out the strategy. The formula that I've shared is maybe more complicated than you need, It could be less complicated than you need. Believe it or not, the actual spreadsheet that we use for content planning and production at Social Media Pulse is even more complicated than the one that I shared today. And we're thinking about more things in that because we're thinking about how it rolls into um, other things beyond just social media. With that being said, make it your own, make it work for you. And that will be so much better to help you succeed with your social media content planning than figuring out how to jump on the latest trend, how to find trending sounds, or figuring out the right hashtag. The content just has to be good and it has to meet the needs of your audience. But yes, you probably need form video. If you're wondering, do I need short form video, vertical video as part of my content strategy? I'm gonna say 95% of the time, regardless of the page, probably yes, because the algorithm does prefer that. No, all of your content doesn't need to be video. It doesn't have to all be video. We also get a lot of questions. I've gotten a lot of questions over the years about links. Don't link to off social media. Social media wants to keep people on that social media, right? Facebook is the one that's notorious for this. Don't post a YouTube link on Facebook. Post natively. Don't post a link to an external website because Facebook wants to keep people on Facebook. I'm going to say, eh, with an asterisk, you can't be posting only links to external sites, but it needs to be an important part of your media mix. And you need to find a mix of content that is going to work for you. Today's lesson isn't about the best media mix for you or content mix, media format mix, whatever you want to call that. Um, but my nutshell takeaway is that the content is going to trump format most of the time. And then the last thing that we want to talk about today in the last few minutes of today's lesson is after you've planned your content, after you've produced your content or you're working with somebody to produce the content, when do you actually post it? It's the first two columns of the spreadsheet because most people want to think about their content chronologically and look at it, in the order that it's going to go out and how it works with each other. But it's really the last thing that we think about. And that is that posting strategy. And again, I don't have any really, really specific recommendations here. I have some general recommendations, but this is how you need to think about posting strategy more than you think about how many times a week am I posting, what times a day am I posting. It's that ideal intersection right there in the middle of that. Great content posted at the ideal frequency at the right time for your audience. And this is where reporting and looking at your specific channels and rolling back to that audit that you did before you started thinking about content is going to be helpful. When is your audience online? The native tools, third party tools like Agorapulse, they tell you this. They tell you the best time of day to post is such and such. You should accept that advice, but you also should experiment and just use some anecdotal evidence as well. And for those of you who might have some specific questions about how often to post is too often to post, you might have a boss or a client who adheres to not the age old, the old myth from 5 or more years ago about don't post on top of yourself. Don't post on top of yourself. You got to give content time to breathe. That is true. If you're posting frequently, multiple times a day on platforms like Facebook, Instagram, like Instagram, the feed, or even Reels, really, and you're posting multiple times a day and you're not seeing any engagement on some of your posts, you probably are posting too often. Slow down, post less, post one time a day, post twice a day. If you're posting 4 times a day, cut it back to 2 times a day. Just experiment with it a little bit to see if you can get an engagement lift, um, and let that stuff breathe a little bit. But Facebook, I still think just 2 times a day, if you've got the content to sustain it, is enough. Some smaller businesses and organizations, especially nonprofits, mom and pop shops, they sometimes have a hard time coming up with content to post every single day, let alone multiple times a day. That's okay. Just post 2 or 3 times a week. That's fine. Instagram, same thing. Same thing. Instagram as far as posting in the feed. Reels and TikTok, they're saying you can post a lot more often on those channels. But I think if you're trying to build an audience with Reels or TikTok or other short form video, you can probably give some stuff some time to breathe and build up to that every single day or multiple times a day. Uh, Instagram stories and Facebook stories still have their place. And I still think it's okay every single day to post like 4 to 6 story slides on your stories, the ephemeral content. Twitter, you can't tweet too much. It's hard for it to be seen anyways. It is gone in an instant. So tweet, tweet all the time. You can never tweet too much. But the thing about Twitter that's more important than tweeting the original content is engaging with other people's content, resharing, commenting. That actually, rather than creating a whole lot of original tweets, that time investment is going to pay off more than creating original content. So that's just some of my generic 10,000 foot level advice. If you had burning questions about how often to post, what that frequency should be. And if you are watching again, if you're watching live or you're watching the replay and you say, no, Ruth, you are wrong. You should do this on this platform. I have seen success with that. Please let me know. I'm here to learn as well. I'm sharing some of my experience, but also wanting to learn from you as well. So we're 52 minutes in. We talked about a formula for content and posting strategy. So I hope that the spreadsheet that I've shared that is linked somewhere in the comments if you're watching the replay, but also at socialmediapulse.info/OH October 13. You'll be able to access that spreadsheet, make a copy of it, make it your own, make it pretty, put your logo on it, do all the things to make it work for you. And I hope that my formula will help you be able to repeat and scale your processes of thinking about content, thinking about how that content works together, and thinking to yourself, oh my goodness, I'm always posting content for this particular ICP, but never this other ICP. Or I'm always posting content that's related to this strategy. So we need to use this other strategy. That's the whole thing about the spreadsheet, sorting and filtering it and looking at it both holistically and at that granular level. That's where I have found it to be really successful to use data to inform what you're doing for planning and producing your content. Be sure to join us next week, right here, same time. We're going to be continuing. You know what? I can't remember off the top of my head what the topic is next week. Let's take a little bit of a sneak peek. Gotta pull that up here in real time. Phyllis is going to be talking about next week. What are we talking about next week, Phyllis? We don't have a topic for next week. So that's one we've got to figure out. If you have suggestions for a topic for office hour next week on October 20th, go ahead, let us know that too, because we're here, Pulse Academy, Social Media Pulse community, to support you in your journey to become a better social media manager tomorrow than you were yesterday. Thanks again for joining, and let us know what you think. See you next time.